The paint-by-numbers game design at the center of Ghostwire Tokyo is a real head-scratcher. Tango Gameworks' previous title, The Evil Within 2, married small explorable hub worlds with tense, impactful survival horror combat pretty well. You could duck into these compact environments while following the story, and stumble upon surprising extra events and get rewarded with supplies. Ghostwire creates a giant open world with thousands of collectibles that a 5-hour story campaign feels fairly unable to justify. With a campaign so short though, I guess they would have been hard-pressed to reasonably sell this at full price without some kind of giant treasure hunts to pad out the package. I'm just a little baffled because Ghostwire had all the pieces to make something classic, but in the end product, the focus isn't there. You have the beautiful, winding, deserted streets of Tokyo, alleys perfect for ghouls and ghosts to stalk. I really like how the game is colorful, but in a tasteful way, where it's not overblown with bloom or garishly bright. There's something to be said for the combat. It's kind of like a slow-paced Doom 2016, whittling down enemy health so you can go in for a scripted animation and recover some energy. The slower speed allows for perfect blocks to be thrown into the mix. A mechanic that's fairly rare for an FPS game and therefore a fun novelty here. Enemies are varied enough for there to be plenty of tricky confrontations where you'll have to think fast about who to focus your attacks on. I feel the combat is a few mechanics away from really shining though. Even with every ability unlocked, I never quite felt that conceptually it reached its full potential. The impact isn't quite there either. To be honest, landing a lot of these attacks doesn't feel that satisfying. Exploring the attractive, compact, atmospheric alleys turns out to not be that big of a focus, as you discover that it's far more efficient to navigate via grey rooftops with very basic traversal mechanics. Rooftops you're encouraged to get on too with all the collectibles up there. There's meatier content to be found in the story missions, where the abstract visual design Tango is starting to make its signature gets to shine. But a lot of the time, the big showy visual pieces are relegated to basically hallways you quickly run through and don't interact with much. The story itself has its high points. The relationship between the protagonist and the older, rugged, paranormal detective hitching a ride in his body is developed well enough, and I was invested in their connection by the end. But the development for the protag and his sister, who he spends the game trying to save, isn't dealt with enough during the course of the game for it to resonate emotionally with me at the end. There are a few noteworthy side quests, but I don't think they're on the level of, say, Ghost of Tsushima's or Cyberpunk side quests, since usually I could see where they were going from the very start. Evil Within 2's smaller pool of side quests felt more substantial and varied than a lot of the find the marker quests here. All the repeated ghost hunts weren't to my taste either. Also, casting every character in the side quests as a blue spectre makes them blend together and feel more homogeneous, even if their plights are substantially different. It took me 46 hours to platinum the game on hard, and I don't recommend going for 100% like I did. It becomes a real tedious grind after a while, with not much reward for doing a great chunk of it. You'll have unlocked all your abilities by about 50% overall completion, and everything else you can unlock is stuff like music tracks or cosmetic items, which isn't too exciting in a single-player first-person game. By the way, did anyone else spend hours just trying to find these ghosts on parade throughout the city? That wasn't fun. For some reason, the spawn rate for them is extremely low. You'd think they'd want me to find this content. You might enjoy the game a lot more if you fancy reading pages about Japanese folklore and ornaments. There's basically an entire wiki of that to unlock here, but it's a pretty niche selling point. I don't know what the impetus was to create a map so sprawling instead of beefing up the content of the main story more. More mechanics and more tailored scenarios in a smaller hub I think would have been more interesting. Confinement and intimacy I just think is a lot more appropriate for the kind of tone this game is going for. Getting up close and personal with evil spirits hiding in dark corners. Of course, the game has moments like that, but they come in drips and drabs. One reason Ghostwire kept my attention is at least it's a new story and a new IP with a beginning, middle, and end, and not the next chapter in some never-ending mega franchise coasting off nostalgia to hit you with enough dopamine so you'll be begging for more at the cliffhanger ending. And it's not to say there aren't some good moments. I like the game's overall take on spirituality and death. Its approach there was quite unique to me, how it deals with these morbid topics with a more upbeat, hopeful perspective. Life and death forming a more comprehensive whole, rather than one being the polar opposite of the other, and that the average person can leave a positive impact beyond their lives. It's a more meditative, less edgy use of death for a video game. A subject a lot of games I like just kind of wield haphazardly without much thought. At the end of the day though, I think I'm disappointed overall. I get the feeling this was meant to be a more ambitious, surprising game, and somewhere along the way some plan fell through and they ended up turning it into a very safe, by-the-numbers open world game to finish it up and get it out the door. I think if the setting you're seeing here looks appealing, then you should get this title on the cheap at some point in the future. There's a thick atmosphere to enjoy and a decent little adventure to blast through. Just perhaps don't go too far off the beaten track.